Welcome to In the Word, a study of the International Bible School lesson. Join Dr. Lee Magnus, Professor Emeritus of Bible, and Dr. Bill Gwaltney, Professor Emeritus of Bible, both from Milligan College, as they bring you their thoughts and knowledge of the study of the Sunday School lesson for the day. Now, here is Dr. Gwaltney.
Well, it's good to welcome you this morning. Dr. Magnus and I are always glad to meet with you in the Word. So we're going to continue our study of the theme for this quarter, God Loves Us. And right now we're in the section where we're going through various passages demonstrating certain qualities of the love of God for humanity and for His creation. Lee, we had a good discussion last time on Paul's outlook as expressed in Ephesians.
Yeah.
Now we're going to leave Paul behind and we'll move to the Apostle John.
The writings of John are full of emphases on love. So
Yes.
It's not surprising that we have several lessons in this unit from the Gospel of John.
The
and
very first
John.
lesson was from 1 John,
Yeah.
which also is connected with the apostle, I believe, and on the theme, God is love, as it was said there. Now here we are back to the writings of the great apostle, and we're going to have three lessons
from
the gospel. They're not one behind the other, but jointly, but. We will have three, and then we're going to go into the Old Testament.
Right.
For some examples.
Yeah. Well, this is a good passage today, and John is a good book for lessons about the love of God. The Gospel of John seems to have been the last one of the four Gospels to be written. And so it's able to reflect back on some of the great themes of the life and teachings of Jesus.
Now, when would you put a date on it?
Most people put it right at the end of the first century, in the decade of the 90s.
Late in the 90s.
Yeah, so about 60 years after the death of Jesus, death and resurrection of Jesus, and about 25 years after the writing of the other Gospels. 15
Mark
to 20
being
years.
earliest, and then followed not too long after
Matthew and Luke about the same, and this would be the last one. So it's able to give a real thematic look, topical look to some of the teachings of Jesus, and love is certainly one of the great themes that we find there.
Right, the love of God.
Yeah,
yes.
The love of God. Now this particular teaching, our viewers will notice, starts out, I am the true vine, which is a reminder that we are studying one of quite a number of I am sayings that the Gospel of John records from the teachings of Jesus.
Yes.
We usually count 7.
I think there are more.
There are probably even more, but we usually count 7. And there are two important things about the I am sayings. One is the metaphor. I am the light, I am the shepherd,
Yes.
I am the vine.
And the way, the truth, the life.
So figuring out what the metaphor refers to, why vine, that's important. But we dare not rush past the opening words, I am,
Right.
because there's a significance just in them, isn't there?
Yes, and we have to go back to the Old Testament. In fact, we'll look at the Old Testament again in regard to this particular I am statement as we move along. But I think the key passage here is in the early part of Exodus, where God confronts Moses at the burning bush. And Moses wants to know you want me to go and speak to the Israelites, and the first thing they're going to ask is, well, who is this God? What is His name? And what am I supposed to tell them? And God, He said, I can say the God of your fathers, but I don't know your name. I can say the God of the fathers, but that's not good enough. And so God reveals His name. I am.
Yeah.
Ehyeh in Hebrew. It's just one word. In Greek, it's two words. But nevertheless, the meaning is the same. I am who I am. I am who I will be. I am who I was. The way in which it's expressed is timeless.
Yeah.
And so God is known as I am. Now there is a slight alteration in the Hebraic form, and you get Yahweh. And so the name Yahweh flows out of the name I am.
Right. And it looks like Jesus has deliberately picked up on that expression for God and used it repeatedly here to talk about the characteristics that
Himself.
of himself.
Yeah, yes.
And so part of what we see here is the function of Jesus as shepherd, as vine, as light, as bread, etc. But part of it is a repeated emphasis on his divine nature.
Yes.
By this repetition of the phrase I am.
That takes us back to the very opening of John in the prologue, that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld His glory.
And this Word is described in the first verse as divine.
Precisely.
With God and sharing God's nature.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should read this passage here, this beautiful teaching about the vine, and look for the emphasis on love, and then we can come back and see the Old Testament background of it as well.
But yeah, it seems to be have an Old Testament passage as a part of it. It flows out of that.
I think
Old
it
Testament.
does. Yeah.
Okay, John chapter 15, beginning at verse 1. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, and so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command: love each other. Now, Lee, the passage goes on. The statement of Jesus does not conclude with this. And we'll have to look at that in order to, I think, get a further clarification on the reason for Jesus to command us to love one another. Now, by the way, this word to love one another makes use of which verb?
This is
For love.
agape. This is agape.
Which means
Sacrificial love.
sacrificial love,
for
love
others.
that overlooks failings in others.
Right. There's another word for love that appears in this passage in the word as the word friends,
yes.
which actually means beloved.
Yes.
And that emphasizes not so much the self-sacrificial nature of love,
But the intimacy.
the intimacy of love.
Yeah.
Friendship or family connection.
Simpatico is the word that pops into my
Okay.
mind.
And that
We
means
used to
what?
use that word quite a lot. People that whose spirits are just so in tune with each other that they have a special appreciation of one
Special
another.
bond, yeah. Well, that's good. And I've heard some people talk about the various words for love in the New Testament as if they were to be ranked. And I don't find that a helpful way to think about it. These are various aspects of describing
Different kinds of expressions.
expressions of divine and human love.
Yeah.
And so one doesn't outweigh the other. I think at times we have to give up our own self-interest for the needs of others. That's agape. But at times we need to express the warm sense of belovedness. I'm my beloved's and he is mine.
Philadelphia.
Yeah, Philadelphia.
Which is the brotherly love, as
Right.
we like to say.
Yeah, so anyway, I think both those concepts work together to describe Christian love, and there are even other terms that aren't used here.
Well, now, here is this I am statement of Jesus, summarized in just one brief statement. What is being communicated here about Christ and about his followers?
Yeah, I think the metaphor of the vine emphasizes absolute interconnectedness. The way that the branches of a vine have to be connected by living tissues,
Right.
you know,
Yes.
and the flow of nutrients from the branches to the vine. That sense of interconnectedness is there. And if the disciples of Jesus don't have that radical, intimate interconnectedness with their Lord, they're going to end up being fruitless and useless, and they might as well not be connected at all.
Yes.
As being just a dead branch on a living vine.
Well, there is a time, however, for cutting branches off.
Mm-hmm.
And that everybody has had grapes understands the vines have to be pruned.
Right.
And other plants it's true too. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, especially true. Do you want vine or do you want grapes? You know, if you want vine, you can build a grape arbor and let it go anywhere it wants to go. Mm-hmm. But by and large, most grapes, you have to prune those runners off and leave only a few runners, or otherwise the grapes will be small and it won't be all that juicy.
Right. Which reminds me, Jesus didn't just pull this metaphor out of thin air about the vine. I think in the back of his mind is a very powerful passage in the prophetic book of Isaiah.
Yes. And I just happen to have
Well, good. I'm glad you do.
my Bible
because
open to that passage.
It's very meaningful to me to see the background that I think would have been in Jesus' mind as he gave this teaching. It's in Isaiah chapter 5.
Chapter 5, and it again, what Jesus makes out of it is very positive with a very crucial warning. But what Isaiah makes out of it is not all that positive, and
True.
it's judgment,
Yes.
God's judgment. But nevertheless, the metaphor is the same. And let me read just enough of it
Good.
so we get a feel for it. And this is Isaiah chapter 5, beginning at verse 1. It's the song of the vineyard. Let me sing for my beloved a love song concerning his vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He dug it and cleared it of stones and planted it with choice vines. He built a watchtower in the midst of it and hewed out a wine vat in it, and he looked for it to yield good grapes, but it yielded wild grapes. Actually, the word wild there, it means stinking.
Oh, my goodness. Rotten
Awful,
grapes.
rotten grapes. And now what Isaiah does with this is to say, this metaphor of the vineyard describes Jerusalem. Jerusalem was God's choice of a city for the temple and all the rest. And he poured out his love upon it and did so much for it. And what's become of it?
Didn't bear good fruit.
Stinks.
Yeah. So what's going to happen to it?
Well, he goes on to say, I'll tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I'll remove its hedge, and it will be devoured. I'll break down its wall. It will be trampled upon. I'll make it a waste. And I'll command the clouds, and don't rain any rain on that place.
So that is a negative teaching,
Yes.
but it begins with the basic metaphor that God is like a vineyard keeper, like a farmer who wants to train up and fertilize and do everything he can, prune, to make sure that his vine, his people, bear good fruit.
Okay, now that's the critical point that we really need to hit hard. And that is, why spend all this effort on the vine, to do all of this for the vine so you have a pretty looking vine? Nope.
No.
It's what you want the vine to produce.
For the sake of the vine dresser, the owner, the farmer.
Yes.
That is good fruit. And as it turns out, for the sake of others whom the vine dresser loves.
I had vines, and the fruit wasn't good. He got hit by blight. My vines did, and they would grow. I mean, the vines would grow, and they were beautiful to look at. But the grapes would get half grown and then wither on the vine. So guess where those vines are now?
In a burn pile somewhere.
Long gone
Okay,
from the
long
burn.
gone.
Long ago, done away.
Yeah. Well, he starts then with this powerful metaphor in verse 1. This is Jesus speaking, am the true vine. And then he refers to God, the God of the love song of the vineyard,
Yes.
back in Isaiah 5, who is compared to a gardener or a vine dresser or farmer, it means.
Now he removes the dead branches and even the pretty branches so that the ones that remain will produce. The whole point to the grapevine, growing the grapevine, is to get the grapes off of it.
Yeah.
Not to make it look pretty.
Right. And I think we need to be clear that when he talks about love in this passage, which is the theme of our unit, and he's going to talk about love very specifically in verses 12 and 13, that love is a kind of fruit bearing. That is, love for one another is the fruit that Jesus wants his disciples to bear.
Exactly.
And so he uses the metaphor of fruit 8 times just in this one paragraph, in this one lesson. It's all over the place.
Now, I remember that it's also in the Sermon on the Mount, but the fruit there is a different kind of fruit, and the message is different about what the disciples are to produce. But here, it's very clear that there are two things, I think, to be brought out of this, and that is there is a purpose, and the purpose is love for one another and love for the world and the salvation of the world and love for the Lord.
Yeah.
But the second is you've got to remain attached.
Yeah. That's
the vine.
that's the other key word here. Fruit bearing is all over this passage. The
Right.
other is that word remain,
Yes.
or in the King James, abide.
Abide.
Was the word. Remain in me. Verse 4 says. Remain, and later on,
I started
remain in my
counting the
love.
times that it appears, and I forget my number, but it's somewhere 10 or 12, and
You
just
know,
in this passage.
For some reason, I counted up the references to bearing fruit. There were 8 of those, and I didn't count
I think
the
there are
references
even more for
of,
remain.
Of remain. Yeah.
A few more.
So remain in me, remain in my love. He promises, I will remain in you. That's the way he talks about this radical, intimate interconnectedness between Jesus and us, his followers. And there is a warning here in verse 5 and 6 that sounds a little bit like Isaiah.
Yeah, exactly.
That
fruit?
branches that don't bear fruit are like a branch that's thrown away and withers. They're picked up and thrown into the fire and burned.
They're fuel for fire.
Yeah. So there is a warning in the midst of this encouragement here.
Now, there's a passage I would like for you especially to focus on, and maybe I'm running too far ahead of you, but it's verse 13.
Okay. Well, I will comment on whatever you want me to if you let me come back eventually to verses 7 and 8. But go
Okay,
ahead.
Go ahead. Okay, thanks. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Now, in the first place, the term friends here is the other great New Testament word for love, phileo.
Phileo, philos, Philadelphia.
Like in Philadelphia.
Right, right.
So, and that's the word that's used for friends. It's also used of Lazarus and Jesus. They were friends using this same term.
Right, and it's one of the words for love, so you could translate it beloved if you wanted.
Yeah, right.
But it has to do with the intimacy of love.
But the comment I would like for you to make is this statement: the greatest love, the matchless love, I guess, from the term of our lesson, greater love has nobody than to lay down one's life for one's friends.
Yeah.
Now, explain this,
Yeah.
but I think it's
that-
misunderstood.
It is. I read that for years, decades, assuming it's a reference to martyrdom.
That's what it sounds like.
And I understand the significance of Christian martyrdom. I'm not ignoring that. I get it. But that actually is not what this verse is talking about. And the way we know that is from the word life.
It's not the word that's usually used for life.
In reference to being alive,
Yeah.
as opposed to being dead.
Yeah. Right.
There are 3 words for life in Greek. One refers to the things of life, like livelihood or our possessions.
Right.
And then the most common one refers to our aliveness, zoe. We get the words like
In zoology.
zoology, alive. And that has to mean alive as opposed to being dead. So I always assumed it was that word, anyone who is willing to lay down your aliveness, that is willing to die for the sake of the needs of others. The love doesn't get any greater than that.
And that is true. Because
yes.
Look at how many in war,
Yeah.
how many times one man will fall on a grenade to keep his
save
buddies
others. Right.
from dying.
So like I say, I'm not belittling the concept of Christian
But
martyrdom
this goes
at all.
beyond that.
This is even more challenging because it applies to all of us, not just to Christian martyrs. This word for life is the word self. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down yourself,
Everything you are.
your aliveness, not alive as opposed to dead, but everything you are, your being, to give your being.
What
for the
would
sake
we
of others.
include? Your thoughts, your commitments, your ethics, your understanding of everything about you and what you think
Yeah.
and how you act is
Exactly.
involved here, right?
Yes. So what he's calling on us to do is to focus our whole lives and thought patterns and attitudes on caring for one another.
And that's then summarized at the last verse, love each other.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so what we have here is kind of the completion of the beautiful picture that we saw starting in Ephesians, where we see this outpouring of the great love of God.
Grace and mercy.
Yeah,
and
kindness of God, this great love, this much love of God, this large love of God. And we see that the way in which that was demonstrated was through Jesus Christ. Now we come to see the outcome, the intention for all of that is that we, the beloved, show that love to other people.
It doesn't stop with God and Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
It goes to the disciples.
Right.
Now back.
Okay, just real quick, I find these verses 7 and 8 interesting because they talk about prayer. And they talk about prayer in a very helpful way. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. Now, it would be very tempting to just pull out a few words there. Ask whatever you want and it'll be done for you. That's what I want prayer to be like, right? Whatever I want, God will do. But it's so important to see that prayer is discussed here in the context of trust in God,
Yes.
obedience to God,
Yes.
fruit bearing. In other
Yes.
words, my prayers should always be in line with how my life can bear fruit, could be more useful to God. And most importantly of all, verse 8 says, our prayer life should always be in the context of God's glory, not my comfort.
This is to my Father's glory.
Yeah, our prayers always have to be bent in the direction of what gives glory to God. So maybe we can all go back to this passage and reflect on it a little more, but I think there's something to be learned about the prayer of the disciple.
So where we've gone here is God loves Jesus Christ. He loves God. And now he expects, that is, Christ expects that his disciples will not only love him and the Father, but also love one another.
Right.
Now, I asked myself at the end of verse 17, why love one another? And this is what I wrote. Because the world hates me, Jesus will say in the very next verse.
Yeah.
And will hate you also. In contrast to the hatred that one sees in the world, the world needs to see us loving one another and loving the world,
Loving others.
and to bring about the love of God and Christ into the world. We need to be able to do it and demonstrate it,
Right.
and not just talk about it.
That's right.
And that's hard.
It is, but it flows out of two things that are emphasized in this passage. One is our obedience to the will of God.
Yes.
We do that because that's God's will. The second thing it flows out of is our interconnectedness with Jesus Christ.
And without
the
that
way-
connection, we can't do it.
Right. That's what it means to be a disciple.
Right. And on that theme, friends, we have to leave you. The old clock on the wall has got us again, but we'll be going on, continuing with this theme of love in coming weeks. So we'll look for you next week. Come and join us, and may God's blessings be with you this day and this week.
This has been In the Word, a study of the International Bible School lesson with Dr. Lee Magnus, Professor Emeritus of Bible from Milligan College, and Dr. Bill Gwaltney, Professor Emeritus of Bible of Milligan College. Join us again next week for another lesson from the International Bible School lesson text. This has been a production of the First Christian Church Television Ministries.